Practical Wellness Radio. I'm your host, Ted, and today on the pod, my co-host Cody and I are super pumped to be talking with Matt Cooper, a USA weightlifting national level coach. Coach Coop is also the head coach of the Pursuit weightlifting team, where he has coached 13 national qualifiers, resulting in 6 top 10 finishes, 2 national bronze medals, and 2 national silver medals. We chat about the how and the why behind training and coaching some of the best weightlifters in the country, while at the same time coaching the person who is maybe just getting into Olympic-style weightlifting. Before we get into the interview, we have a Theodore Roosevelt quote as part of our warm-up waves. Far and away, the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. If you're at a conversation with someone and you walk away thinking, wow, that person is doing with their life exactly what they're supposed to be doing with their life. Their work fits them. It's part of them. It works for them. It's their identity. And we had a bit of that when we chatted with Coach Cooper. His passion for what he does is only matched by his work ethic. And you'll hear that in the interview. So I don't have to say any more about that. But what I will say is that life can reward us if we let it. And look, maybe you're thinking and you're listening to this, well, shit, I don't really love my job that much. But listen, it just doesn't have to be your career. Maybe it's a hobby you're super excited about. Or if you're really lucky, it's a significant other or your kid or family that drives you. But it doesn't matter what it is. Out of all of those scenarios, they all take work. But if you find your passion for that work, for that hobby, for that significant other, remember, far and away, the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. One thing before we dive into our interview with Coach Cooper, a client spotlight and shout out to Practical Wellness client Liz. She's been working with Cody at Practical Wellness since 2018, I think August of 2018, and has a big birthday coming up this year. And with that, she still is chasing a pull-up and a deadlift goal. But, Cody says that Liz is the type of person who always brings the energy, and he's impressed at how open she is to new challenges. So good luck moving forward, and thanks for letting us be a part of your fitness journey, Liz. Now, on to the interview. All right, here we go. We've got Matt Cooper from Pursuit Nutrition and Training Center in Windsor, Colorado, weightlifting coach, strength coach. Coop, what's up? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, before we go any farther, I don't know if you really remember this, and now that I'm kind of talking about this out loud, I hope this is the right scenario. There's a few years ago, where I think on social media or something, there was this thing going around and people were sharing like albums that influenced them, like musical albums that influenced a lot. Yeah. And I think you shared, and I didn't tell Cody this until just now, I think you shared 2 separate Turnpike Troubadour albums.
Oh my gosh, my guy.
Okay. So if Cody and I are like working out together, there's a good chance we're probably listening to Turnpike Troubadour. So you're already like, we're like, okay, cool. We like this.
Get him in the club. Get him in the club.
Isn't it funny? Go ahead.
I just went and saw them at Red Rocks last summer or the summer before.
Yeah, I think we were at that show. Cody came out to that show too.
Yeah, Ted and I were there.
Nice.
Yeah. What's funny too?
Yeah, Randy Rogers Band.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I really like Randy Rogers Band too. But yeah, Cody came out to Colorado for that. That was my first. I think that was my first ever Red Rock show. And first and maybe only. I don't think I've been back.
Mine too.
I've only been to 2 Red Rock shows and 2 very different ones. So
what was the other one you went to?
The other one was Rob Zombie and Godsmack.
Perfect. That's great, man. That's good. That's awesome.
I had tickets to go to their Red Rock show like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Before they had canceled it when they kind of broke up or whatever ended up happening. It's a shame, not to bring down the vibes, but I was excited to
I
go.
think the lead singer had an alcohol problem, right?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard he was dealing with some issues.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything since really, but I think we all hope they get back together. Isn't it funny how like music, you can immediately like if you know a dude that likes like the same music as you, you're kind of like, cool. That's all I need to know. I dig this guy, you know. Like,
you check out.
if we can listen to the same music together, that's good. What kind of music is often playing in the gym at Pursuit?
Oh man, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
A lot of, and I've never really been exposed to this before. Christian hip hop.
Oh yeah,
like Christian rap, and it sounds super hardcore. But then you really start listening to lyrics. I'm like, this guy's singing about how much he loves his wife. I'm not used to rap songs.
Is it like Lecrae? I think is one. Something like that.
I have no idea.
I've had like clients and members in the past that have introduced me as well.
Yeah. It is interesting because you're right. You're so used to that vibe just being different than you're right. Like, but yeah, no, I actually have listened to some Christian rap too, just kind of like by chance, and you kind of get behind it because you're like, oh, it's got a steady beat and it's uplifting, and it is what it is.
Yeah,
but,
so we got a lot of stuff with kids. We have a lot of kids classes and stuff going on, so we listen to a lot of that. But then, like, there's times, like, especially, if it's just me and a few other guys in there, then start getting the Slipknot and Tupac. And
for sure.
All the essentials.
I think I even said on our last podcast, like, I have a little garage gym, and oftentimes, so I have 2 girls now, Coop, if you don't know, and actually my oldest daughter, who just turned 3, she was 6 months old. We took her to that Turnpike Troubadours concert. She was 6 months old. We had like the big like earmuffs that were way too big for her head, and she slept the whole show. Like, it was perfect.
Wow.
Like I was a little nervous, but my wife wanted to go, and I wanted her to go too. And we're like, we're just going to make the most of it. If Amy, my wife, wasn't too stressed if she had to go to the car for half an hour or whatever, but it worked. We just sat and sang our asses off, drank a bunch of beer, and watched Turnpike Troubadours. It was great. But I totally lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with that. But
it's all good.
But anyway, so obviously weightlifting is kind of like your thing, right? And I it's probably one of my favorite like disciplines, if we're talking about disciplines in fitness too. And so that's why I wanted to have you on. How did you originally like get in and fall in love with weightlifting?
Oh, I think the same way a lot of people did. Started off in CrossFit, which, was a ton of fun for years. Started competing in that, got my competitive juices flowing again. That was probably around when I was 24, 23 when I found CrossFit. Yeah. And, started doing that again. And then just over time, just really started gravitating to the Olympic lifts and wanting to truly be stronger. And I felt, and don't get me wrong, I'm by no means like a basher of CrossFit. I love CrossFit, but I wanted to narrow my focus. All right. I didn't give a shit about doing toes to bar anymore. I hate toes to bar. And then, and then like I'd show up and then the workout, I'm like 300, I gotta do 300 double unders. I don't care, and so I'm trying to be a good jump roper. So it just evolved like that. And then, we talked about it before we started recording. I'm a high school PE teacher at Windsor High School. And then I started a weightlifting program there. That went really well for a few years until it, unfortunately had to go away. But then, I found, the owners of Pursuit I had known for a long time, Samson and Zach, and they had been asking me to come and be a coach there, and it felt like the right time. And then the coaching the high school team is kind of really what got me into coaching. I started having a lot of success with it. Won some national medals and stuff like that. And that's when I really decided I want to truly pursue this and coach this and compete in this. And yeah, that's how it went.
That's awesome. So were you, were you coaching, you did coach some CrossFit also before just weightlifting, correct or no?
Yes, I was
cool.
Yeah, coaching CrossFit for a long time.
Yeah, Cody and I are kind of, I think we all have very similar backgrounds actually. Now that we're talking about this, I think I was right around 23 when I started doing CrossFit too, and
yes, 21 probably.
Yeah, Cody's a little younger, but yeah, no. Anyway, I think I was kind of the same way. I really loved CrossFit, and I kind of enjoyed the constantly varied. It's something different every day. It kind of reinvigorated my love for fitness in a way. But there's something about the discipline in weightlifting that I was attracted to immediately too. It's not just, I mean, you can simplify it as much as you want to, but if you want to go the other route, down the other side of the road, like you can really dive deep into like some really like technical elements of just what are really just kind of 2-3 lifts, but there's so many things that go into it. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe before we move on, you mentioned you had some athletes that you coached that, did pretty well, won some medals and had some cool accomplishments. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So while I was at the high school, had a lot of kids who I didn't expect to join weightlifting. The way I envisioned it when I started it was like, okay, a bunch of athletes are going to do this in their off season. It was never that. It was always the kids who were just, team sports wasn't really their thing. Or they were doing team sports, but then really enjoyed, just focusing on me and, all that. And so that was surprising. And then a couple kids that did really well, Dante Valdez. So and I still coach him. He won a couple medals at junior nationals as a junior in high school, and did really well. And then he just won this past year at junior nationals, won a couple more medals in the 61 kilo category at that meet, which was in California. He's a 61 kilo lifter, which is about 130 pounds, 129 or something like that. And he clean and jerked 131 kilos, which is like 289 pounds.
It's crazy. It's awesome.
Take home a medal there. So that was, so his two meets that he medaled at. And then another girl, Mary Barris, she won 2 bronze medals at youth nationals last summer in Anaheim. She was funny because when I met her, first of all, she was so shy and so terrified of me. She would never look at me or anything. And when I met her, because I coached her older brother as well, I coach him as a power lifter now.
Okay.
But when I met her, I was like, just kind of joking. I'm like, when are you going to, start doing weightlifting? She looked at me. She's like, oh, no way I'm doing that. And then finally she came. She's like, all right, fine. I'll do weightlifting, but I'm never competing. And then she's gone on to be my most successful female lifter. And she's,
that's awesome.
And she's little. She's, like 97 pounds, but can back squat 230. And she's just a little tank.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
Do you notice a difference, between, all right, so 2-part question, right? Do you notice a difference between coaching men versus women? And maybe we'll say also like girls and boys. So like different age groups. And then also like, yeah.
Females, I have noticed, tend to love the process more.
Yeah.
Now there's certainly exceptions, like for example, Dante's an exception. Very patient, very detail oriented, which you have to be successful at this sport. But, especially coming from a high school background, okay, it would be, the girls wanting to do every little thing right. And then the boys wanting to be aggressive and, just want to come in, want to start moving weight. I have to rein them in. And it was sometimes, the girls, sometimes they're just a little too cautious and a little too detail oriented. I'm like, hey, quit thinking so much and just be aggressive. Yeah. And then with the boys, sometimes I'm like, hey, you need to think a little bit and quit being so aggressive. And so when you can just kind of marry those two things together, know when it's time to be analytical and detail oriented and when it's time to be like, hey, this is a sport and it's time to compete and it's time to go. Like, let's move some weight.
Do you feel like that process, that mentality of maybe being too timid or too aggressive, does that train out eventually, or is it dependent on the athlete as well?
Yeah, I think it definitely trains out if they don't quit. I had so many boys when I was doing the high school program, and actually even at Pursuit now, men coming in. It's just not what they think it is. It gets hard for men. When I have a handful of, I have 3 girls right now who are like 16, 17 years old who are just, they're beasts, Mary, Ruby, and Alar. And then you get a grown man coming in here and I'm having him like, no, dude, you're just moving an empty barbell. And they look to their left and there's, some little girl putting more weight over her head than he's ever touched. I mean, it gets hard. Yeah, exactly. And so you lose some guys that way. But then the ones that are successful, they eventually, like you said, they learn that mentality of, okay, if I want to be good at this, I need to chill. I need to take a step back, check my ego and work on the details. And then once you start getting in a rhythm, Ted, you were talking about this before, it becomes so fun because there's so much to think about. And I'm still to this day changing little things in my technique and start positions and, stuff like that. It's just always, even though it is only essentially 2 movements that you're competing in, there's just so many things that you can constantly work on that keep it interesting.
I have a question in terms of, and so you're coaching masters athletes as well, right? Mm-hmm. When you say someone new comes in your door, whether it's, a youth athlete or a masters, how do you approach, and they're fresh, right? We'll just say they haven't done this before, minimal experience. Do you approach their, coaching in a different way, or is it pretty similar in terms of how are we starting this process?
Yeah, so I definitely have my way of teaching the snatch and clean and jerk. Now, and when I say my way, I start with a top-down approach. So, for example, the snatch, okay, we're learning what it feels like to have a bar over your head in a wide grip. That's where we're starting. And then, just start working my way down. And actually for weeks, they're not taking a snatch off the floor. We're just learning how to drive our feet through the floor at the top of the lift and catch in this very awkward position if you've never done it before. But then every athlete's different. So there might be some athletes where I'm ready, like, okay, you've got this part down, let's move on to this. Or some we might need to stay with the basics for a while. And my progression typically goes like this. I have my beginner drills and on-ramp stuff on a whiteboard in our training area that, like, hey, you're going to go, I call it the snatch series, clean series, jerk series. I'm like, hey, I want you to go through part B of the snatch series 5 times today or something like that. And I have it broken into sections to work on common issues I see with each lift. So, for example, if they struggle with the overhead position in a snatch, okay, that's going to be part A. Okay, you're going to work on part A of the snatch series for 5 rounds today. Then after that, I'm just simply, coming up with complexes and drills for that particular person to do. And with all my athletes, I have a Google Doc. We have a shared Google Doc where only me and that athlete have access to it. Every Sunday, I spend a few hours sitting down, distributing programming for the week. most athletes like that are getting ready for competition, their whole 12-week cycle is already done. You know, I make little changes here and there along the way, but for the most part, the whole thing's done. With an athlete like this, very new, that week, I look at them like, okay, and I look at some of my notes I've made, and like, okay, this person needs to work on this, and that will dictate their training and what drills they're doing that week. Then the next phase is, okay, we now need to start getting you comfortable doing more weight. So I have a master's athlete right now, actually in this phase. Her name's Sonia, and she's going to be awesome if she sticks with this. Yeah. But essentially, we have a sheet, and we are now in week 8. Week 8, and every 4 weeks I change up the drills, and we're getting more sport specific as we go. We're going into the last 4 weeks, and so it's going to be nothing but snatch singles, clean and jerk singles, back squats, and very specific. But we've been every 4 weeks. I've created a Google sheet where she enters her weights, and then so like a 3-position snatch complex for 10 sets. Each set, I want you to enter your weight, and then it calculates the average. And then in week 2, I'm saying, okay, you're now doing only 8 sets of that, so the volume is less. So I want this number to exceed the previous week. I want your average to go up a little bit. And so then she can, and so it's just such a developmentally appropriate way to apply a progressive overload. Just simply, hey, this is the average you did this week. Let's just up that average, even if it's by a fraction. Okay, we are just slowly over time getting comfortable with doing these things with more weight. And now at the end of that, she'll be ready to like, hey, let's see what you got. Let's do a 1-rep max on the snatch and clean and jerk, and then start doing some more traditional, percentage-based programming from there. I know I just rambled for like 20 minutes, but
well, for guys like Cody and I, that's actually really interesting. That's really, really cool. I think that approach to introduce somebody where it's hard to, and we ran into this a lot, like, when I was coaching CrossFit, somebody starts and we snatch and we squat and we do pull-ups and we do everything. And really, we only probably have an opportunity to work on a movement like the snatch in a CrossFit gym, in a CrossFit setting. Yeah. Twice a month if you're lucky.
The exposure's really low.
Exactly. And so, you might have somebody who's been doing CrossFit for 6 months, but you add that up, that means they've worked on snatch technique 12 times,
Yeah.
And spread out too, like weeks apart.
For sure. And it's so hard to kind of assess with such a high skill level movement what kind of weight should be in their hands. And I think the way you laid that out, like, it's really interesting from my perspective to kind of see how you did that. And I think it's interesting too, what you said earlier. I think the 2 names that you mentioned who you've had the most success with, athletes in coaching, you also kind of said they're the most disciplined and the most that are into kind of the details. And so I think whether you're mowing lawns or lifting weights, like, that's what it's all about, right? Is just paying attention to the small things and details. So do you often have like some athletes that come in and maybe they need just a little bit more certain attention in different areas when we're talking about weightlifting? Do you do like certain accessory programs for somebody who maybe just needs to get through an injury or get through something else? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we definitely do a lot of accessories, and the great thing about Pursuit is we have access to every kind of piece of strength equipment you could think of. We got, reverse hypers, belt squat, leg extension, leg curl, all the dumbbells, all the kettlebells, every kind of barbell you can think of. So my ability to apply some variants and accessories to a training program is great because it's such an awesome, versatile facility. So yes, I definitely, we do a lot of bodybuilding. Okay. I can think of a handful of athletes off the top of my head where like, dude, we just need to kind of put some meat on these giant levers you have, and do a lot of that. And also I'm a big believer in that, in injury prevention. Absolutely. I will always do things like, unilateral work in the leg of Bulgarian split squats. And I love, leg curls and leg extensions, just like, hey, let's just isolate the knee. Let's build up the musculature around the knee, and the shoulders. I love light, lateral flies and reverse flies, and just like, hey, let's just build and engage the musculature around your shoulder. Now, when it comes to injury, we have a PT that works out of our gym, so I try to send my athletes to her, because one thing I think a lot of coaches try to do too much is play doctor. And I tell my athletes, I can help you out a little bit, but if you have something that just won't go away, I'm like I'm not a doctor, man. You got to go see someone.
Stay within your scope.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm probably at this point going to do more harm than good, because I don't know what I'm doing.
I always think that when people, I just want to add on to your point. I like that. I like a coach, and I like people who are willing to admit, maybe this isn't my expertise, right? Because I think in a way it kind of validates everything that you had set up until that point. Like, hey, I'm Matt Cooper. Yeah. I know snatch. I know clean and jerk. Let's fricking go. I'll help you with that. You have an injury. Well, here's what it might be, but we have access to a PT, so let's really figure out really what it is, so it's not a guessing game. And I think that just continues to add value to kind of what you have.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell them that, I'm like, look, you and I could try and figure out, and we could dick around with this for weeks, or you can just make an appointment and then we can figure it out right away, Right. So, but something I've used recently in terms of coming back from injury is actually velocity-based training. I actually recently just posted a video about it where I rambled for like 10 minutes. I didn't realize it was that long, but I posted it anyway. So me, for example, I had a hernia the past last year, and I had to squat forever. Like, it took forever to heal. It wasn't bad enough for surgery, so they were just like, you just got to let it heal on your own, and it took forever. So when I wanted to get back into competing and lifting and squatting again, I had nowhere to start. And so this past summer, one of my quarantine projects was reading about and studying velocity-based training. I had heard a lot about it. Sounded kind of gimmicky to me for a long time until I really got into it. And, when you read books and different things regarding strength training in the fitness industry, you have some things you're like, okay, that was interesting. I mean, it's nothing life-changing. It didn't speak to me. That was interesting, but I don't foresee myself really going on my way to apply a lot of this or change how I do things. Mm-hmm. When I started reading about velocity-based training, it had this light bulb. I'm like, God, this makes so much sense to me.
Can you give us an example just for people listening, what that might be?
So velocity-based training is, I actually have sensors that I put on a barbell, and it syncs to our phones, and we can actually track the speed of the bar. And there's been a ton of research done that associates certain speeds with certain percentages of your 1 rep max. So for the back squat, if you have 75% on the bar, you should be moving it between 0.5 meters per second and 0.75 meters per second. Things like that. And it makes you, like, when you first put that sensor on the bar, man, and we're all guilty of it, let's say we have 60% back squats. Yeah. Okay. We stand up with it. We're like, all right, mission accomplished. But
yeah, exactly.
If I say, like, you're doing 60% and you should be able to move it this fast, and then that first rep you do and you fell way below it, you're like, oh shit, I have not been working very hard at all. My power output in my training has been garbage.
No wasted reps, right?
Right. So the intent of your training gets increased so much because you are just really driving through this bar to get it moving as fast as you can. I've even I love using it with pulls. So when you've done clean pulls and snatch pulls, right, it's probably my least favorite thing to do in weightlifting. It's boring. It's heavy. It's
clean
exhausting.
Pulls are awful.
Yeah, dude, they suck.
I'm always like, you'll do clean pulls at like 95% of your 1 rep max, and you're like, first of all, how did I ever pick this up to my shoulders, right? And you're like, because it's so heavy and it's so, but then, no, sorry.
I like clean pulls. I'm sorry, guys, but
oh my God.
It's my favorite thing. Like, get my working sets of cleans in, and then you finish with some heavy clean pulls. I'm like, all right, let's do it. I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, that's weird. what I've started doing with poles is we put the sensor on it, and I don't give them any kind of target speed. You know, I turn it into some great feedback I got from athletes. Like it makes poles fun because it's like a video game. Because all I simply tell them is like, hey, beat your best score. Like, okay, you moved that one at 1.8 meters per second. Okay, that's your top end now. You better try and beat it. And once again, that intent of what you're trying to do increases because we're all guilty of it. Just like with the squats, we have a 95% pull, and we deadlift, and then we do a little shrug at the top of it. And it's not that we're not doing what that exercise is designed to do. But if
Missing
I give
the
you
intention.
if I give you a number to compete with and a score to beat, all right, man, you're gonna be moving that thing. You are going to be pulling the hell out of it. And lastly, what it does is it gives you some technical feedback. So let's stay with the pulse. Let's say you're playing around with a new start position, and all of a sudden you sink your hips lower in the start position of a clean, and all of a sudden the speed of your pulls is going way up. You've now gotten quantifiable feedback that is a better start position because you are now able to more efficiently apply force and power into that bar. So little things like that, or they got an early arm bend and then they see a huge drop in their speed. Like, because you bent your arms early, focus on keeping your arms straight and towing the bar. And then all of a sudden their speed jumps back up and they're like, oh, okay, he's not just talking out his ass. It's moving faster.
And on your device, you can see like the acceleration phase within the lift, correct?
Yeah, so I can either track average velocity or peak velocity. So when it comes to ballistic movements like the pulls and snatch and clean and jerk, I want to look at their peak velocity. With things like squats, I want to look at average. Because then if we look at peak velocity in the back squat, okay, they can have a 8-second long back squat and stand up and go, rip.
Right, and there's a peak.
And and just drive it up. And then it shows it as super fast, even though it's the slowest squat in history. So we want to look at average with movements like squats or deadlifts or bench press, stuff like that.
I played around with this a little myself, not enough to really dive into it much. I used to have, I still do somewhere, something that you put on the collar. It functioned as a clip. I can't remember the brand. What do you guys use?
So I found this company called Push. It's actually a Canadian company. I before I started buying, this technology, I did a ton of research. I read a lot of reviews, and they came up, very well reviewed. The price was very reasonable, and I actually this summer got to actually calibrate that with a $2,000 Tendo unit. Okay, so you got Tendo and GymAware, which are like the gold standard, where they actually have the cables that attach to your bar. So a little backstory to this, actually. I went and spent a few days with. Are you guys familiar with Spencer Arnold?
I don't think so.
It's all right. He's the head coach of Power and Grace Performance out in Georgia. And if they had the Olympics happen this year, I think he would have had 3 athletes in the Olympics. So he coaches Harrison Morris.
Yeah,
Harrison Morris, Jordan De La Cruz.
Yeah.
Jordan De La Cruz, Morgan King. And then a bunch of other just absolute amazing athletes.
Harrison Morris is one of my favorite lifters, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a super nice dude.
Cool.
But so when I see something like that, and the book I actually read on VelocityBased Training, he co-authored. And so this summer, I reached out to him, and I just said, hey, man, you're obviously doing something right. You're doing something awesome over there. Can I just come spend a few days, maybe pick your brain, take you out to dinner, kind of hang around the gym and watch? He could not have been more accommodating, man. He let me into his home. I ate dinner with his family.
That's awesome.
We sat down and pulled up Harrison Morris's personal program on his flat screen, and he talked me through it.
That's so cool. Wow.
It was awesome. And then while I was at the gym, I took my push sensor, and I think they have GymAware there. And while Harrison Morris was doing some insane amount of weight on front squats, I asked him, I was like, hey, Harrison, can I hook this GymAware unit up to your bar as well as my push sensor and see the readings. He was like, hell yeah, man. And he actually got super interested in it and was looking at the data I was writing. And so I was tracking the speeds and the difference. And it was a negligible difference between my $400 push sensor and the $2,000 tendon unit.
That had to make you feel pretty good.
Yeah. So I felt very good about that purchase. And so I bought a few more.
Heck yeah.
I wrote a grant and got a bunch of those at the high school, and stuff. So, so that's how I started getting into that. It's certainly not it's not the only thing that matters. A lot of people have this misconception when you use velocity-based training that every decision I make in regards to an athlete's training, I have some kind of dogmatic adherence to velocity data. It's just not the case. It's part of what we do, but ultimately, intuition, performance, and things like that, how things feel are ultimately what's going to drive our decisions. But it's definitely a data point that we use, a tool we use. It helps create intent, like we discussed, and I found it to be very useful.
Yeah, like you said, as a tool. And you said intuition. Do you do a lot of intuitive training with your athletes based off of maybe their subjective feelings about whether, even a specific lift or how they're feeling that day, or maybe what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to open up that line of communication all the time. And I got some athletes that are very good at it, and some who are afraid I'm going to think less of them, or think they're a wuss. Like if they tell me hey, these squats are making my knees feel like they're going to explode, that's, I need to know that,
Yeah.
So but I have a few athletes, once again, Dante is very good at that. Dante is not a whiner. Okay. So if he comes to me and he tells me, hey man, this doesn't feel right, I'm immediately, well, get it out. Let's find out what we can do different. And things like that. So it's a big part of coaching, because athletes got to take some of the responsibility in this too. You need to tell me, I'm making decisions based on what I think is best. But if I've programmed something for you that's just not working, or I've assigned a certain percentage that's just making you fall to pieces during this complex, I need to know.
Right.
I have an athlete currently right now. He's having a ton of knee pain, and he's just telling me my knees are just aching. And he's a taller guy, so a lot of times you see a taller athlete with squatting, it's a lot of volume that can really wear on them. But what's great about it is with the training programs designed in the way they track data. Okay, I track Olympic lifts. Competition lifts, I should say. Competition lifts, pulls, squats. And I track, how much of their total volume is allocated to those movements. He came to me and was telling me all this, and then we sent him to that PT I was discussing earlier, and just based on it, we just kind of decided to, I think I just have him squatting too much. And he came and told me this feedback. And so now, because I do track his volume and how much is allocated to what, I now have a great set of data of 6 weeks that shows me this amount of squatting he does not respond well to. And so now I've just redistributed that volume, bumped his squats down, added some more powers into his snatch and cleans, because he actually needs to work on a full extension and pull anyway. So so tracking the data and then getting that athlete feedback is, I think, essential into building a successful athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, sorry. You just said, again, a couple of things there that I think bears repeating. With your athlete Dante and other athletes, this tall athlete you're talking about, it's just communication, right? I think so many people right now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, Olympic weightlifting sounds pretty cool. Go Google it, and there's thousands of programs you can follow, right? Thousands. And you know what? You could probably find hundreds of them for free. But if you want to get really good at it and you want to have an opportunity to have success at it, it needs to be from a trusted source with good communication, and there needs to be the equity too, right? And so it sounds like you're putting a lot of a lot of energy into one, the process, but two, also, you know, the individual, right? So not just the process, but also the individual, their thought, their concerns, and their goals too. So I just wanted to give you props for that, because I know that when you're training a lot of athletes, and you're training a lot of athletes, but you're training them with kind of the same stuff, right? You know, we're snatching, we're clean and jerking, we're squatting, we're doing whatever, we're pulling, and it's not a one size fit all. Very often. So I just wanted to make that point. Go ahead, Cody.
No, I was just going to say there's a large human element in coaching that we don't, well, at least new coaches probably don't realize. I mean, Ted, you've been coaching how long now?
Just 10 years. Yep. Just right on 10 years.
Yeah, I'm getting there too. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, hey, they're all individuals, right? Regardless, it's the same goal, right? Whether that's a competitive athlete getting on the podium or hitting certain percentages on a given day, but there's a big human element in having a high quality coach that understands that and communicates. I think it's priceless.
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to get, especially with all the resources on the internet and different books and things like that, to get too hung up on theory. While there are definitely, you need to understand a lot of the principles to strength training, how you adhere to those principles is going to look so different for everybody. So my four main when I design a program, I always run it through these four filters. Okay, progressive overload, variance, specificity, and fatigue management. Now, those four things, I think, I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say need to be present in every strength program.
Yep.
But now how I accomplish those things is going to be different for every athlete. So you do have your specific things that should be present, and your, like for me, for example, all my athletes are going to snatch and clean and jerk. But, based on different accessories, complexes, positional work, how, like I was just talking about my athlete, how their volume is distributed. Okay. This athlete need to squat more, this athlete need to focus more on competition lifts. So for example, I had this athlete, unfortunately, he just moved away. Oh my God. I'm so upset about it.
That's tough as a coach. Yeah.
Oh man.
That's tough as a coach when somebody
stupid
moves.
Life and well-paying jobs.
Yeah. Exactly.
But anyways, so this dude could squat a freaking house. Right? He had I think he had a 600-pound back squat in him, and he, but yet
that's pretty good.
Him and I, so I have a 450-pound back squat.
Yeah.
Him and I could clean and jerk the same.
Yeah.
So what that tells me right there, looking at the disparity between his clean and jerk and his back squat, okay, this guy just needs more practice in the Olympic lifts. So for him, okay, his squat volume was low, very low, just enough to, keep the strength that he had, but most of his work was allocated towards his Olympic lifts. Now, when it comes to his squatting, that's not to say we didn't try to get him stronger. Yes, he definitely did improve his leg strength, but it was not, he only has so many physical resources to allocate to training. And I looked at that and said, he needs to allocate more of his resources to the competition lifts. Whereas I might have another athlete who they just need more leg strength. Okay. They're going to be higher volume of squatting. So but yeah, I just feel like if you find your guiding principles, like those four I just discussed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can you say those one more time? You said say it one more time for me, because I can't say it. Progressive overload, fatigue. Yeah.
Yes. Progressive overload, fatigue management, variance, and specificity.
Cool. Do you
Would
think
you say fatigue management goes in the hats of getting enough sleep, nutrition, hydration, just general life stress management as well, I suppose?
Yeah, and that's where we get into the athlete needs to take part in this. It's not just me. And I'm going to try and not get heated here, but you have an athlete, I spend a lot of time making these programs, spending my Sunday mornings that I could be spending having coffee with my wife and, stuff like that. I spend in front of a laptop putting together programs to help these athletes. And when they show up to a training session and they tell me, oh, I slept 2 hours and I haven't eaten all day, it pisses me off because I'm like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Like, I just put so much time into this training this week and you can't even bother to function like a person. And so when it comes to, the fatigue management, yes, that's the sleep and the eating that, like, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. That's on you. You got to do that. I mean, obviously with nutrition and stuff, I can definitely guide you.
No, I think you're right. I had to kind of, it's funny, Cody, because I was going to talk about that same thing, and Matt, you took it the perfect direction. It's like, and a lot of times I think you're not really asking them to like, I mean, in some instances you are for, right, that next level, but I think what you're referring to right now, it's not like you're asking them to count calories, count macros, all that. It's just get enough sleep and don't eat like an idiot, right? Like that's just kind of what you're looking for. And so I think what goes understated sometimes is how much effort and time people do put into these programs from the coaching aspect, right? Yeah. So what would you mind, I mean, you don't have to give us exact timestamps, but what does kind of a day in the life look like for Coach Coop?
Like a normal weekday?
A normal work day, yeah.
Oh. So typically in the mornings, I have a few one-on-one clients. So I do some one-on-one training with the Olympic lifts, mostly some masters lifters who are trying to learn. So it's just some instructional periods. Then I go teach PE at the high school all day from, like 8 in the morning to 4. I teach primarily weights classes there. So I have my weights 1, weights 2, and I teach some your like general freshman PE. Then after that, I head right back to Pursuit, and I coach the weightlifting team from 4:30 to 6-ish, sometimes 6:30, depending on the volume that week. And then I head home.
It's a full day.
Yeah.
And I want to say this. It's funny because the PE and the weights, that resonated with me because that's when I first that was my first introduction to weight training was in high school. I got tired of swimming for PE and I was like, I'm not doing that again. And one of the options was taking, a weights class as an alternative. So that was my introduction to weight training, however long ago, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So I just wanted to throw some props out to that because I think that's an important thing to have at any high school.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun designing that program for a class because it's different than coaching. When I'm coaching, okay, these are people who want to be there, and it's the best part of their day, and they're paying a lot of money to do it. When you're teaching a high school weights class, I'd venture to say the vast majority of them don't want to be in there. So that's the hard part. But I just got to talk about it real quick because I love the way the programs come together. So weights 1 and weights 2 at Windsor High School. So we got weights 1, which is all learning how to function in a weight room. Okay. You're learning how to set your rack height and, clips and how to load and unload a bar, which apparently is a very confusing task. Especially the deadlift. Oh my God. Watching the things they come up with to load and unload a deadlift bar is insane. But then we learned 4 primary movements: back squat, bench press, overhead press, deadlift. And they are tested and assessed on those via video analysis, in-person, cognitive exam. I mean, we do the whole thing. Then in weights 2, we learn program design. So those 4 principles I just talked about, we spend all semester learning how to apply them in different ways, and then the difference between hypertrophy training and strength training. And then their final assignment in that class, I've actually built a very, I don't want to say dumbed down, but less complex training template. So the same thing that tracks my data for my weightlifting athletes, I've built one that tracks volume and intensity for these kids. And they simply plug in what exercise they want and the reps and weight. And I just tell them, okay, make an 8-week program, and it's going to graph and track your volume and intensity for you. And then at the end of it, they write an analysis writing, how does your program adhere to progressive overload? How does it adhere to variance, specificity, and fatigue management? And they do a synopsis of their 8-week program based on all those things. And I always just tell them, like, guys, I want you to be able to leave high school and actually be able to go into a weight room with a coherent plan. I don't want anyone from Windsor High School to be that person that walks into a gym and kind of just wanders aimlessly, does a set here, does a set there, walks on the treadmill while drinking a Slurpee, and then goes home. So I'm pretty excited with how much the kids have actually taken to that. And them being able to explain to me, these 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, the concept of progressive overload in a hypertrophy program. Like, it's pretty cool.
That's amazing. And I actually teach what sounds like to be very similar classes. So I teach at the university, these physical education classes, and I have an intro class that just started, intro to weight training. And it's the same thing in terms of, how do you set up a rack? The
only difference is you're teaching 20-year-olds and he's teaching 14, 15-year-olds.
but these 20-year-olds, like, they don't know either. So I'm happy to hear that, hey, there's someone out there teaching them in high school before because a lot of times these kids will come in and like, hey, like, I have a messed up knee, I've had back pain for 2 years, and, there's this whole thing. And I'm like, or I played high school sports and I have, I played football and this is a kid that I just read his first assignments, basically giving me their history and limitations and things like that. And, half the time I'm like, man, like, you already lived a rough life just because maybe we weren't as intentional with our movement as we could have been. Right. Yeah. So I'm happy to hear that. It got me excited.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. And, I remember too, when I first started programming and writing workouts, whether it be for weightlifting or CrossFit or just either, general population stuff too. It's work, right? It's a lot of work. And I remember, sitting at my desk with my little lamp and my laptop and writing things out, and you're like short on sleep and you got to wake up, like you said, early the next morning. And all of a sudden you finish this program and then you start looking back and you're like, does any of this shit make sense? Did I just completely, it is a process, and it sounds like you've got a roadmap that kind of keeps you squared away. And so you have a process and you test it and continually evolve. But, with that all being said, it takes, I think when we're talking about the weightlifting, Olympic style weightlifting, the snatch and the clean and jerk, it is very much, the mindset needed is very much one of like, okay, you're going to dig your heels in and you're going to lean into the hailstorm and you're just going to continue to put work in. And so you're the guy who is spending, 12, 13-hour days working on introducing young kids to weightlifting, introducing, general population to weightlifting, and continuing to move already passionate weightlifters forward. So what continues? We'll wrap this up here in a little bit too. We just have a couple more questions. What continues to motivate you? What continues to what continues to get you out of bed and keep you moving forward and grind towards, coaching 2 lifts in a simple way of saying it?
I think just I'm competitive, that's never left me. And when I have athletes who are also competitive, it just brings that out more in me. And, it's obviously, about, I love helping people, make them feel stronger, actually get stronger, healthy lifestyle, all that stuff. But I think I would be a liar if I didn't say, like, I am just competitive. Like, I want my lifters to beat your lifters.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes because this is, we spend most of our time in a gym. Yes, this is about health and wellness. And I truly do mean that, health and wellness first and foremost. But then sometimes I feel like we lose track sometimes, like, hey, like this is a sport. We are going to be here in a few months. We're going to be heading out to Detroit for the national championships on stage. And there are going to be coaches who are going to be trying to have their athletes beat you. They're going to be trying to kill your rest periods by managing the clock. Like, we are going to be in it. Like, so you got to start getting your head right. I'm working with a particular athlete right now, a youth athlete, and we're doing a lot of mental preparation like that. We're like, because she has so much fun during training that then when it comes competition time, she's so jarred because she's not used to that pressure, because most of the time she's just having so much fun. So we've been going through like mental exercises of how to create that pressure in training and get her used to that. And I'm kind of going off the rails here.
Well, I'm curious about that, actually. I want to hear more about that. Do you do like visualization? Like, how do you train that?
Play mental games with yourself. Like, okay, you're about to hit a 90% snatch in training. Okay. I want you to imagine you just missed your first 2 snatches on a competition platform. If you don't make this lift, you're done. Like, your meet's over. Like, make this lift. Do everything you would do to make this lift. And so that's something I've been saying to her, like, I know what her program is. I know what she's got coming up. I'm like, all right. Or I'll say, because she has goals of winning the national championship. I'm like, okay, this is the national championships. You make this lift, you go home with a medal. Okay. You miss this lift, you go home with nothing. Make this lift. Just stuff like that, and get used to people watching you. Like I think we've all met that athlete who gets really timid when people watch him. Yeah. And so I'm like, you gotta get over that. Like, what do you think is going to happen in a meet? Everyone's watching you. You're the only person anyone's looking at. Get used to that. I also try to little things, like they always have to have their platform and their bar all the time. I'm like, get that out of your head. You're not going to you can't bring this platform with you to nationals. Like, stop doing that. Like, grab it. It doesn't matter where you are, what bar you're using, make your lifts. As well as some athletes get freaked out when you put the big red weights on, and so instead of doing that, they'll put a little yellow and a little they'll put a 15 kilo plate on and a green 10 kilo plate on. It's the same weight, but they're just to me it's a mental weakness. Like, it's the same weight, but just because of the color and size of that weight, you're letting it freak you out. So I try to beat things like that out of them as well.
Awesome. That stuff happens all the time for sure.
Yeah, like, I felt some of that too.
Yeah, I remember too. And I've kind of, so this is my analogy and my comparison to that in a way. So I played basketball in high school, right? And so basketball coaches are always trying to get you to be better at shooting free throws, right? Like, you hate missing free throws, and instead of like, here's a basketball, go shoot free throws for 10 minutes, it was, here's a basketball, if you make 5 in a row, you get to go home. Right. And that's kind of the analogy, is like, and I've even done that with some of my weightlifters that I've coached before too, is, hey, we're going to load the bar up. We got to hit 3 singles at 85%. That's all you got to do today. And if you make them 3 in a row, you get to go home. And we did it for like every Friday for a month. Right. And you're probably familiar with this too, is, what do they call it? Like a minimum, I can't think of the terminology for it. Anyway, it'll come to me.
I know what you're saying. It's what's like,
I talk to you.
No matter what, you got 5 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep. This is the weight you can always hit. Is that where you're going?
Instead of like a 1 rep max. Yeah, exactly.
What's like your minimum that you can do for the day?
No, I'll text you later, Coop. I'll come in and I'll be like, dang it. Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of that. But I think too, man, it's cool to see. I think Cody and I are energized by what we offer and kind of what we're offering through practical wellness. And I think and you seem to be the same, right? It's sharing your passion for something, right? Whether it's like showing your cousin who's never watched Star Wars before, like, hey, you're gonna love it. Star Wars is awesome, no matter what it is. Like, if you're sharing, that's always rewarding, and that's kind of fun in a way too, right? And so, you know, I think this is great. We probably could talk to you for another hour. I love weightlifting. Cody loves weightlifting. It's obvious that you love it. You mentioned earlier you shared a video, I think you said on Instagram. Do you want to plug your Instagram where you talked a little bit about that velocity-based training or whatever else is going on?
Yeah, I'm not much of a hype guy, and so when it comes to like making videos, I'm like, okay, I want to do something to kind of market the program a little bit, but I can't do it like a lot of the fitness industry does, you know.
For the record, I think most good coaches aren't.
Right.
Aren't like, yeah.
Don't scroll through our Instagram because you're not getting anything.
Yeah. So I I've started making videos. I've taught myself iMovies, where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to talk about shit I find interesting. So first one I did was, so by the way, the Instagram handle's Coop, or at Coop_pursuit.weightlifting. But yeah, first video I made was just about how I track data. So I have, you know, screen share of like an example of my programs and, you know, like how I track their volume and intensity and how I allocate it to different categories. Then I did one about velocity-based training recently. But then most of my Instagram is me sharing videos of my athletes and myself lifting. So it's mostly that. Yeah. But I'm trying to do more content because I love talking about this stuff. I've just with the, you know, teaching myself how to use technology more has been interesting. But
do you have like an email or anything? I know so have maybe a little reach in Fort Collins just through Ted. If anybody had any questions, or maybe if someone wants to, do you do like remote stuff or anything like that? Zoom sessions?
I do. Yeah, especially with the way I do things through the Google Docs, makes I feel like my online or remote coaching ability very good. I do with any remote athlete, you know, like a remote virtual video analysis, like once a week. I'm like, you know, like, hey, you know, send me. I want to see this lift. Like, okay, you got a single here at 90% on Wednesday. Okay, I want to see that. Like, send that to me. And then using the Coach's Eye app, do a nice thorough breakdown with my voiceover and drawing stuff on there and everything. But yeah, so my email is matt@pursuit.fit. And when it comes to the gym, like for anyone that is in the Northern Colorado area, Pursuit has a little bit of everything and not just weightlifting. So we have, and you know, I'll say I think one of the, if not the best weightlifting facilities in the state. We've really done a nice job with our training area. But aside from that, we have a powerlifting program with two great coaches, Joe and Brandon, great dudes. We have like our general pop classes, you know, for people that aren't interested in really, you know, just interested in fitness and being in good shape. We have a bodybuilding, like competitive figure bodybuilding program with a coach who runs it. We have strongman training, you know, and I mean, we just got a little bit of everything. It is just an awesome facility. So if anyone is interested in weightlifting, for sure, come talk to me. But if you want to get into the sport of strength sports, I think Pursuit's definitely the place to be.
It's the Mecca.
Daily minimums. It's a Greg Everett program. So it just came to me, right? So it's instead of it's focused mostly on the baseline, right? So what you can hit 7 days a week, right?
Okay.
Every single day you can walk into the gym and you can hit this number. And so instead of working off of 1 rep maxes, which are tested and peaked for, and you know, so that's kind of anyway. If you haven't looked into it, I really dug that.
Yeah,
that worked really well for me when it came.
Oh man, I'm a huge fan of Greg Everett.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
And real quick, anyone out there wanting to go to a good weightlifting seminar, I went to his in Utah last year. Best weightlifting seminar I went to.
That's awesome.
Not only was it super thorough and effective, but the dude is freaking hilarious and just super
I've heard good things.
Interesting. Learned a lot, entertaining. I cannot recommend his seminar.
Have you ever watched his Q&As on Instagram?
Yeah.
Those are solid.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Well, cool. Coop, thanks so much for jumping on with us. This is great.
Yep.
Again, like I said, Cody and I are weightlifting fans, so we could have talked, I think, for a long time about this. We'll probably actually try to have you on again because I feel like we just scratched the surface on a few things. But thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, and I'd love to come on again because, yeah, there's definitely things like, oh, man, I wish I had talked about this or I just said this. Yeah.
Cool down question segment coming at you in just a bit. But if you guys haven't yet, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It helps us out a lot. Also, check out our website, practicalwellnesscoach.com, to stay up to date on everything we have going on. Okay, cool down question time. Today's question comes from Mike, and Mike says he spent the last month or so rehabbing tennis elbow. He's realized that he has a fair baseline knowledge of learning how to lift, but he's never really learned how to stretch. And, specifically when it comes to what exercises to do for how long and the frequency of those exercises. And he understands that this question probably depends on many things like age and how you're lifting and many more things too. But his question is, generally speaking, how much should someone stretch prior to or post-workout? And he adds in here that he normally has about an hour to work out in a day. So Cody, when you hear that, what's your kind of first things that jump out at you?
Well, I think we want to spend most of our time placing ourselves under a stress that'll create eventual adaptation, right? So getting the minimum in that you need as a human, as an individual specifically, is what we want. Now, that takes a lot of time and a lot of self-awareness, maybe some trial and error. But I think that's the idea, right? Less talk, more rock. You want to be rocking, right? You want to get to the meat of the workout relatively quickly, right? We're kind of on a time limit. I know Mike had said that he's got an hour, right? You want to make the most out of that time that you have, right? To progress towards whatever your goals may be. So that's kind of the gist of it, right? That's the short answer, and we can kind of get into the long answer too. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he kind of mentions a little bit about, stretching before workouts or after workouts, and he's not maybe sure exactly where to start. But I think that, let's just kind of break it down here real quick, right? Mm-hmm. I think you need to be doing something before your workout, and I think it's just as valuable to do something after your workout. Mm-hmm. So when I'm thinking about a warm up, I want to do a couple of things. I want to prime my body for today's workload, whatever that might include, right?
So it's specific, right? Specific to the day.
Very specific. If it's a high intensity workout, you're pinning your ears back, your hair's on fire, and you're gonna really, really push the limits of some things that you're trying to accomplish. I think it's a pretty dialed in and calculated warm up, right? If it's maybe a little bit more aerobic based workout, low intensity, low impact, I don't think it needs to be super, super intense in a warm up. I'd maybe try to set aside more time then for a cool down at the end to add some, non-dynamic stretches, maybe some static stretches where you really dig into a position for multiple minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, but whenever I warm up, I think the most undervalued and underutilized thing of a warm up is just kind of increasing your body's core temperature, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of us are working out from home, maybe working out in a cold garage if you live in the Midwest like Cody and I do. And I think it's just undervalued, the importance of just warming your body up, right? Oh, weird. It's called a warm up, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And so keep that in mind. Try to make yourself sweat. I think if you can get your muscles warm, your body warm, they're going to be a little bit more elastic. They're going to resist and fight off, potential injuries a little bit better. And then, if you have time left over at the end and you don't have to jump back into real world stuff, let's throw in some static stretches. For elbow specifically, it's really it's really hard to kind of dial in and jump right into exactly maybe what you should be doing without, maybe knowing the extent of the injury. But
yeah, it's a tougher question because we don't know, specifically in this situation, how this person moves and the volume they were doing. And, and that's part of it. It's basically a tendonitis, right? Which is usually perpetuated by maybe too much volume or maybe inefficient movement or a mixture of both, right? And those take a long time to kind of get back to feeling normal, right? 6-8 weeks. It's a bit of a process. This is what I do anymore. Maybe we should go to that, right?
Yeah.
Because I've had tendonitis in the past in my elbows specifically. It's basically probably what Mike's experienced in a lot of ways. And what I've found to be useful is, like you're saying, let's warm up the body. I think that's just for everybody, regardless. And then warm up with the movements that you're going to be doing. So here's an example, right? If I'm doing an overhead press based workout, right? We'll say I'm going to do some strict overhead presses. I'm going to do some single arm work as part of my warm up. I'm going to grab some light dumbbells, maybe a light kettlebell, and I'm going to press overhead. I'm going to work that range of motion. I'm going to go slow. So particularly the eccentric or the down portion of the lift, I'm going to really take my time and emphasize that range of motion to warm up my elbows, to warm up my shoulders, to prepare them for heavier loads and more dynamic movement. Now, that's just, again, a base. It might need to be diversified a little bit. You might have some range of motion limitations that you might have to open up and work on before you even get to that phase, right? And that's going to be very individualized. And that goes back to knowing yourself and what you need, which is a bit of a process. Like if I know I'm missing some specific range of motion in my shoulder, I can work on that. And that is individual to me, right? So if I'm missing shoulder flexion, we'll say, right, which is basically bringing that arm up in line with your ear, I can maybe do some passive hangs. I know that's useful for me to decompress the spine and open everything up. And then I would maybe do some of those single arm movements to warm up the joints and things like that.
Yeah. And I think something Mike or whoever else is listening to this, you can utilize is, a while back on the Practical Wellness Coach Instagram page at Practical Wellness Coach, we had a little bit of a warm-up series that you can look into. I think, we included the workouts that we were doing with those warm-ups. You can kind of piece some things together. I think the videos were time-lapsed, but you can maybe catch the gist of it. And if you have questions, just send us a message in there. We'll be happy to help you out. If you have a workout tomorrow and you're not really, sure what to do for a warm-up, send us a message. We'll give you a little bit of guidance. Also, I think on our YouTube page, Cody, we have a dynamic warm-up kind of video series that potentially maybe we could link in this episode too. And this is kind of a check-in. Like I think you still do it quite a bit. I try to do it every day, Cody, with these dynamic range of motion warm-ups. It's just kind of a check-in. It runs you through it takes 2 minutes. And you do some movement patterns, very simple movement patterns that you can just stand up and do. You don't have to warm up for. And if something feels weird, if something feels off, if something feels tight, you get that immediate feedback. Hey, I'm going to take the next 30 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it is to address whatever the issue might be.
Yeah. And basically it's a diagnostic tool, right, for how you're feeling that day. So I'm going through my joint prep, maybe my dynamic warm up if I'm doing that, and I'm just listening to my body. Where are my kind of hang up spots? Are my hips a little tight today, right? Am I having a little trouble doing some of these hurdle steps as an example, or even something simple like some over unders with the arms, right? The classic Michael Phelps, back and forth.
Yeah.
Is my chest, my pec really sore or tight? You can figure that out and you can identify that. And then after that sequence, you can, say, I need to do this. This is what I need to do to open that up because it's going to inhibit me later on in this workout.
Yeah, and I'll add also too, if you have a very chronic issue or something that's going on and has been going on for a long time, it might be something that needs to be addressed a little bit more frequently than just right before or right after your workout. In fact, it needs to probably become a little bit of a priority where before you go to bed, you just throw in a couple stretches, or in the morning, if you have time, you throw in a couple stretches. When you get home from work, if you're watching TV, set a timer on your cell phone, set it on the ground, whatever you need to do if anybody has questions on certain things, you know, we can do our best to help you out with that. But I think just adding that in, it all adds up. You know, I used to joke, we had a member at the gym that I owned before, and he was a decent mover. You know, he moved pretty well, but he always showed up late to our 5:15 a.m. class, right? And he showed up, you know, 5 minutes late.
That person.
Every gym has that person, so I'm not just picking on this dude, but I used to joke because it was 5 minutes late, 4 to 5 days a week, all years, multiple years long, right? And I was like, man, he's probably missed out on days, hours of like stretching and warm up that we could have maybe helped and caused some change and some big impact. So it all adds up, you know, it just all adds up. If you can find 5 minutes before you go to bed at the end of the week, you know, think about how much time in a good position and an improvement position that we can find.
Yeah. And it goes to, you know, if you want to change something, you have to spend time with that. And range of motion is no different if that's your limitation, right? So for me, right, my hips get super tight. I need to spend time in those shapes that are challenging that. The more the better, essentially. You could overdo it, absolutely. But, you know, and you're saying, hey, before bed, my girlfriend and I, we do that. Every night before bed, we stretch 5-10 minutes, just kind of work on the things we need to work on, kind of as we're winding down, maybe watching a little TV, and it just becomes a habit. Now, I do want to say for those that are listening, not everyone needs to do some of this stuff. Some people have more than adequate range of motion where maybe their time in their warm-up is better spent on stability work, right? Figuring out where is the appropriate end range for me. I have clients that, hey, you're going past neutral, right? I worked with someone today that has some hyperextension in their elbows. And hey, Mike, maybe this was an issue, right? So something to think about too, right? Where, hey, you're going past neutral where it's a detriment now to your joint. So that's something to consider too. So again, this goes back to knowing yourself. There's no blanket statement here. And it's a process and a journey. Figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And then like I said at the very beginning, Ted, you know, be actionable. Less talk, more rock. So get through that warm up and get to what you want to be working on as soon as you can.
Yeah, I think that there's some great stuff in there, you know, just to kind of review, you know, we talked about just prioritizing, you know, if you only got an hour, it needs to be focused in an hour. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Like when you're in there, boom, set the phone off, set the phone away, put it across the room, put it in a different room, commit yourself to what you're focusing on, increase that core temperature, maybe do that dynamic range of motion, check our YouTube page out for that. But if you have any more questions, you can shoot us a message at info@practicalwellnesscoach.com. But that'll do it for today's episode of Practical Wellness Radio. Please rate, review, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.